So we've got all of our panelists joined now. So welcome our second panel for our AI in-depth discussion with Q&A. So we've got Shashank here of Texile, David McCall back on from Tyson. We've got Gokin from IBM, Jeff from University of Louisville, and then Conrad is still on the call. So he's gonna, this is kind of a little more in-depth discussion. It won't be so question-based. So Conrad's gonna kind of lead us through these questions as well. I will get to the first screen here. So Conrad, if you want to kind of take on this first topic.
Sure. So I just, I'll see the screen. So it's in depth, but it's also, I wanted to keep this specific session, since we're kind of towards the end of the day, informal and engaging. So when we talk through these slides, and I'll kind of throw the themes around, I'd like the audience to share with us a little bit from their perspective, their takeaways. And I'd like to have a discussion. Our third question here is actually around the session takeaways. I've seen most people have been on here the whole time. So feel free to take some of those and put them in the chat for our purpose. And also, if you have topics that you didn't see covered, we have this think tank available to us now in this discussion forum. So ask these questions that maybe are not related to a particular topic that you've seen or particular vertical, because I think collectively we have enough expertise here to give you a flavor of some information that could be relevant to you. And again, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So I think we have everyone. Do we have everyone on the call? Or we have?
Yep, we've got them all now.
I thought you weren't here, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I forgot to add him at the last second.
That's
I got
okay.
him.
I was getting worried. So this is a chart of the daily increasing coronavirus cases and deaths per day. And I wanted to bring this up to provide context to a lot of what the theme behind the event is, which is back to business with AI. We all work in industry. We all have families. We all have colleagues. So I wanted to go around and get a feel from each of you as to like what this means to you personally, but also what does this mean to you in the context of how can technology help, and more specifically, how can AI help you within your organization to help mitigate some of this, to help mitigate it either from a safety perspective or from just a continuity perspective to allow you guys to continue to operate when we're living in these changing, very difficult circumstances in many cases, right? And I'll start based on my clockwise here on the screen. So I'll start with Shashank. If you can share a little bit. First of all, maybe just briefly introduce yourself since we didn't get a chance and you haven't been, I guess, on any of the previous sessions, and then feel free to just dive into the topic.
Sure. Thank you, Conrad. Shashank Tumar. I manage IT function for Texile Supply. We are into, we supply pipes and tubular goods to companies in shale area. So our business was significantly impacted. It was already under a lot of pressure. And with what happened to oil in last few months, where demand collapsed and we had supply glut because of geopolitical issues. So we had significant challenges. We're still having challenges. We're not out of it. So that was that's kind of more of a dynamics from market side, and that drove the changes in within our organization, if you will. Okay. Of course, from the point of life cycle of an organization, this is like an overnight thing. Maybe COVID happened, and what you do now. Okay. So to kind of put it in context, in near term, We have used technology, not necessarily AI, but more of a collaboration tools, plus some tools for training our staff in the plant, in the office, to take care of themselves, take care of people around them. Okay. So that is what we are doing right now. Longer term, if hopefully it will not continue long, but what I see is us able to use some of the things that was said in earlier presentation, like social distancing, finding opportunities for training the staff on social distancing if you find violations or any other safety violations, if you will, that are important from health and safety of our employee, plus from brand perspective.
Okay, that's a great insight, and I think the oil and gas market, of course, is one kind of that double collapse with COVID, and then the geopolitical issues, like you mentioned. Jeff, I wanted to have you cover this topic next, both as an academic and also being an AI, you maybe have an additional perspective as well. But from the campus perspective, how is this affecting your ability to work? And then how do you see AI technologies maybe mitigating some of that? I know we've covered that topic a few times, but you're in the College of Business, and maybe there's another dimension to that topic. So there are people that maybe engage you as an expert in AI that to the College of Business that are looking for ways to have some sort of competitive advantage or some sort of way of mitigating their own problems around COVID. So both from a personal perspective and from a professional perspective, if you can cover that, I think you have a unique dimension here.
Okay, Conrad, thank you so much. So my name is Jeff Guan, and I'm on the faculty of the College of Business, and my specialty is computer information systems. I actually have an engineering degree, but I've been teaching in the College of Business for the last 20, 30 years. And so I think COVID-19 is certainly very disruptive to my business, which is higher education. And so I think it exposed a lot of the problems that higher education has. And so we don't have good answers at this point. Just to give an example, we typically learn, or we have been learning up to until COVID-19 in a face-to-face environment. And the teachers, instructors, professors are used to that mode of learning or teaching, and the students certainly have been brought up like that as well. And so I personally have found online learning to be less effective, but it could be because I didn't use the right methods. And I'm sure that innovation will follow. And I see that there are a lot of platforms in these like Coursera, DataCamp. They have very good platforms, and maybe higher education and these innovators can collaborate. The current platform we have is not that conducive to online learning. And so that's from my personal perspective. And and of course, I'm in the business of education. So I would encourage anyone, because I was eavesdropping earlier today, on and off. And so I think this is a great opportunity to maybe pick up on a skill set that you lack, and or your organization needs. And I'm also the director of the Master of Science in Business Analytics. So we have seen a great uptick in the interest in the program. And so those students, undergraduates that just graduate or have just graduated in May, they're instead of directly going into the job market, they want to pick up on an additional set of skills. So that's something that I think we probably, people who are young professionals, that's an option for you to think about.
Thank you, Jeff. David, we saw you earlier today in a really compelling presentation about Tyson Foods and what they're doing to help support worker safety. And I'd like you maybe just for the audience here to briefly talk about that, but then feel free to personalize this chart for yourself, because I know you wanted to cover the Tyson pieces there, and here's an opportunity to kind of engage this audience in a little bit of a different way.
Sure, thanks, Conrad. Yeah, so high level overview, I'd say, is one of our 7 principles. The first of our 7 principles is about team member safety. And I talked about earlier how we're leveraging AI, using vision and other ML type tools to make sure that we keep our team members safe, making sure that they return home back in the same fashion they came, the same state they came to work, just like all of us would expect as we go to our workplaces too. So I think from a COVID standpoint, obviously there's been a huge impact. There were some questions early on about, is this a food transmittable virus, which it's not. So from a Tyson perspective, we initially had to kind of fight off some misinformation, but then immediately we saw, especially in our Midwest, North Midwest part of the country, where several of our plants were really hit hard with the positive case counts of our team members. So to do what's right, we decided to close those locations and make sure that we had enough time for those team members to recover, and make sure that we put all of the CDC guidelines and beyond in place for our team member safety. So we continue to hear about stories where our team members in certain locations, we've got families where, for example, there's an upstairs and a downstairs to homes or houses, and the team member that works at the plant basically quarantines themselves every day, either upstairs or downstairs away from their family, just to make sure that their own family is safe. So we continue to see stories like that. I know it's affected our everyday decisions, myself and my family, and think twice about going out and just running to the store to get something. As we look forward, I think one of the things that Tyson's trying to do, as we look at the data, like this graph that you've got shown up, reminded me of some of our previous press releases. We're trying to take this data to make sure that we can kind of foresee the next step. We saw several of our poultry locations get hit pretty hard with the virus on the East Coast. And we looked very hard at all of that data to see if we could make sense of it and even predict what would happen as the virus kind of made its way inland and across the country. Where we may not be able to do as much as we would like, one of the previous press releases that we put out is we are for sure sharing data with government agencies and epidemiologists where we do our mass testing. So for example, we had a location in Northwest Arkansas where we tested over 1,300 team members. Something like 200 came back positive, and only one of those team members was symptomatic. So while that's not a piece of data that we can generalize, it may help some of our government agencies and health agencies to use AI in their organizations to help make recommendations for the greater public. So where we can't use AI to help us get to the very next step, we are for sure sharing that data so others can use it with machine learning and hopefully predictive analytics to make sure that we're just maybe one step ahead of that virus.
I love how you concluded, because as you were talking, I was going to ask this question and kind of load it a little bit, just David, to follow up with you. Tyson, from my perspective, has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to technology adoption, and maybe some of that is grounded in those principles that you shared, right? Investment in technology. And do you see the industry, your industry specifically, not being prepared? And I know no one can have been truly prepared for this, but is there kind of a reluctance to invest in technology proactively within the space because it's a cost that potentially is compounded with risk or with just reduction in bottom line? Is that an inherent part of the resistance that you see as an IT professional that you have to maybe not work through internally in Tynesy, maybe so, but in general within that? And can you share a little bit about that perspective?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would say there are a couple of elements in play there. So one, I would say we're all human and sometimes we don't like change. And introducing tools like this that may help us do things much faster and more accurately can be seen almost as a threat. So that's a change too. So that's on us to make sure that we work with our team members to understand what the change is and how it's going to make their job easier. They can do something that's more value added. The cost is something that comes into play, but I think also that's a partnership between IT and the business to understand. Okay, let's say you've got these 5 opportunities and projects in front of you. If you really think through all of the steps and what success looks like for those projects, determine the ROI on those. And if you've got 5 AI related projects and one of them has the highest ROI, then stick with that. And it'll get you to that next phase where eventually, maybe when you come back to that same type of a problem that needs to be kind of chipped away at again, likelihood that that technology is going to be a little bit cheaper that time around. The other thing I would say is as we continue to roll out these types of solutions, that kind of chips away at the unwillingness to change a bit. And when they see how it can help other people, we start to see almost a pull model in our business where we have some of these technologies in our plants and the corporate setting, rather than us trying to introduce our business to these new tools and what they can offer. As we start to continue rather to communicate and highlight and showcase what the capabilities are, we start to see a pull model. And as they start to understand what AI really means and what it can do for them, we're starting to get the pull type model where they're saying, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? Can you apply it here? I've seen this in other places. How about we add this and make these 2 solutions solve this problem for us? So it's, like I said earlier, I think it's a bit of a journey, but as people continue to see what the benefits are, it's going to become more of a commonplace ask.
Right, and then that pull piece is a function of, at least in part, of your digital maturity, right? So it's interesting that you share that. I'm going to just move on to Gökhan. Gökhan, I know you're joining us from across the pond in Europe, so thank you for joining us so late. So I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll ask you in this question to remove your IBM hat because I have a nice compounded IBM question for you right after this, and talk about this perspective. Being in Europe, what does this mean to you, and how do you see as an individual, because I wanted to get that dimension, AI supporting these sort of the circumstances that you live in Europe, which is maybe to some extent significantly different than what we're seeing in the US right now, but nonetheless, we're all living through this collectively.
Probably it is. You are definitely right. I would approach this regionally, but first maybe I should introduce myself. Hello, my name is Gökhan, and I work in IBM as a product owner for IBM Cloud offering, and I also lead some AI-powered solutions in Europe region for IBM, very briefly. So regionally thinking, being in Poland during this COVID-19, of course, naturally, the impact was huge, right? And especially if you live in such country with limited health facilities and opportunities, people were very right to be scared, especially we as foreigners, because we also have this language barrier, which is maybe another great use case of AI, right? So of course we were scared, and then we had to live with this reality. And now we are thinking about going back to the office, and of course, not only me as individual, but also I hear many different stories around Poland. People are kind of hesitating, and we have the scarcity to go back to our offices. And actually, you said you will ask about IBM. Maybe I should wait for that question first. But of course, we have a couple different ways to address and tackle these problems that we have at the moment.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. One is AI to help support knowledge sharing, and AI to help support better communication between individuals. You said you're an expat, right? And having the ability to have maybe natural language, and the tools are available, but they're becoming more and more robust as mechanisms to help the psychological dimension to interacting in these sort of high pressure circumstances. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next slide because I have my IBM questions all loaded up for you.
Okay, sure.
And we'll work backwards from here. So you mentioned, you know, you're a product owner for IBM, and I wanted you to share a little bit. Of course, IBM has such a large umbrella of work that they're doing in AI. So maybe some of the more compelling things that you've had a chance to work with or otherwise, you know, somehow interact with that leverage AI, specifically for back to business purposes. So that could be health and safety, that could be operational benefits. Whichever one you choose might be the most compelling.
Of course. So during the morning, we heard many different great use cases of AI during this COVID-19 crisis. And similarly, IBM is also providing such similar AI-powered solutions to the market. Very high level, and these solutions have different use cases, and these use cases are mainly around space allocation, using almost real-time data from Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile phones, and cameras, and also related to that, social distancing measurement. Also, IBM is doing some work specifically related to employee health with the site monitoring, temperature measuring, and all other different kind of data leveraging the data. And also very interesting actually use case that IBM started to adapt in the CIC Poland, which is face mask detection. And based on that space allocation for the employees, this is something that we started to use, and I believe it's really helpful. And also, last but not least, of course, we have AI-based communication, which kind of covers virtual agents and highly capable chatbots, which I'm a part of. My experience with AI is mainly on the chatbot creation and this kind of domain. So I see a great benefit in chatbot, and actually, as an example, IBM has an offering, like a non-commercial offering to United States and many different countries around the world. Poland is one of them. And we, as a team, created a chatbot, which is a smart chatbot, not only gives a response, dummy responses, but also leveraging online information, real-time online information to create awareness about COVID-19 and help people to get more information as they want.
Okay, that's great, actually. So I have more questions for you, but I wanted to rotate through here. And the next person I have here below me is Shashank. And I know that he's been working with the consortium as well. And he's kind of the industrial connection to some work that you've heard the Penn State team talk about, some of the work that I mentioned early on. And I don't want to load you with a specific direction, Shashank, so feel free to talk about different AI initiatives if this is the low-hanging one. I also really liked when you sent me the multi-dimensional pentagon about where your organization is relative to data, technology, and process, and all these other things. If you can talk us through, obviously, what you're doing, but also in what's happening in your industry is not just specifically related to the work that you're doing in AI, but maybe it's related to the gaps that exist to fundamentally build AI. So I really enjoyed that share, and if you can share a little bit about that as well.
Sure. So as we talked about, the industry is impacted in a major way. We have a lot of bankruptcies in our industry. And that effectively means that companies don't have cash to support their operations. With many different things, but that's one of the things I can say. That means our customers are cash strapped. That means we should be providing them solutions at potentially lower cost. I mean, there are many different components to it, but we see that this industry will have lower, smaller footprint as we go forward, which also means that if we can get out of this funk well enough, we probably will have more opportunities, if you will, to expand. Now, so if looking at the opportunity that will go forward, there are three ways I look at opportunity. Either is it can we support business growth, can we improve efficiency, can we do risk mitigation? At least in near term, next 3-6 months, until the time we have more kind of capital investment, I see efficiency will be a major driver for the projects. Now, so how do we decide what project do we evaluate? Now, of course, AI is one of the I would say technology that can be leveraged, but generally the way I see it is we go to evaluate where we are. So the opportunity that we have in our organization in terms of efficiency of the shop floor, can I support just-in-time type solution to my customers? If I pull back from there, I want to understand, can I realistically develop a solution? Technology component, people, process, governance, these are the kind of things that I think. Generally, my experience is that business applications where you have human beings keying in the information, you get it, your probability of getting a good data will be less than the data being generated by the machines. So that's where we talk about improving efficiency on the shop floor, like automatic defect detection. So that initiative, I mean, today, if I go to my boss to say I need a few $1 million for doing something cool, I don't think that can just fly like that. I have to, today I can go to him, say, I can replace this cost, I can do better. Means at X cost today, I can bring in the solution at Y cost, and Y is less than X, and I can do something better for my customers, if you would, as an organization. That's how I tend to think about these initiatives. So we talked about automatic defect detection on our product like pipe. You have finishing problem. You have say threads on our pipes are not correct. For that we have just relatively effort-intensive activity. It's also a bottleneck in our supply chain within the plant, if you will. So if that could be one area that we can look at. Other area that I see is production yield. So what's the demand for from customer, and how much do I need to build where, when? That could be another area where we can look at. So these are, I see there are opportunities, but how do we realistically address them in our context in the organization that we have? You guys talk about the big gap in the talent. How do I handle that? Because I cannot have 50 data scientists doing the work for me, right? So I am keen on experimenting with auto ML. Let's see where does it go. I'm still learning about that. We are so that is a technology gap that I'm trying to address. from people gap, when I select project, I also look at which organization I'm working with. Do we have leadership that will be pro-change, who can drive the change within the organization? Of course, operation is unfortunate that we have a good pool there actually. So, I mean, that's, so people, process, technology, what the maturity level on each of the component today, what it needs for me to be successful in each of those dimensions. So my thought process that each one of us should look at where we are today on each of those dimensions and see if we can realistically execute those projects to success to evaluate the opportunities.
Right.
Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. What I'm going to do, just for the sake of time, and since I think this question for the next two folks is somewhat redundant, is we're going to jump to the third question. And while we jump to the third question, I'll say one thing. I noticed there isn't much in the chat for our discussion. Normally, if this was a live event, I thought people would be more shy, not less shy, to share some of their insights. And I would call people out based on eye contact, but I can't see any of you, unfortunately, except for the panelists. I want to urge, as we talk through this question, right, I want to urge the audience to also share a takeaway from the event in our chat. And that goes for everyone because we're coming up towards the end here and I'll have my closing remarks. I like to take those takeaways both as a guiding light for us and as a guiding light to everyone else in the group that could highlight some points that could be reinforced both in our efforts in the consortium and also for everyone in the audience. And so I know not all of you were here for the entire event. Some of you were here just for this session. Some of you sneak peeked in and out. And that's fine. I think you understand the theme of this event as a whole. And Jeff, I'll start with you. Build the goals of the consortium. You've been working with us for quite some time, almost since the beginning, if not from the beginning. And we have these 4 pillars: the data standards, research and development, and business strategy. We host these events. We hosted the last one in 2019, back when we can host an event on site inside the auditorium at your university. And that had a different goal. There was a lot of workshops and technical discussion, and this one has a unique goal. So from your perspective, what are the takeaways that people should take from this event, and what can they do with those takeaways in terms of next steps for them?
Sure, thank you. So I've seen a lot of slides with 5 years on it. And so I think even though it's difficult to predict precisely what's going to happen in 5 years, but I think one thing that I think that will happen is that the tools for AI will become even more sophisticated so that you'll be able to focus on problem solving even more than say, for example, 5 years ago or currently. And so I'm glad Gökhan is here in the audience. In the panel. U of L has signed a contract with IBM. So we're offering IBM Skills Academy classes. I went to those classes myself. We're offering IBM Watson Studio class on AI, cloud computing, IoT, and a whole bunch of them. And of course, design science. So what I have seen is that the tools, as we go through those IBM modules, the tools evolve. I mean, those IBM developers in the back, I mean, they do something the night before, and the next day we go to the class, and the tools will look a little different. So it's moving very, very fast. And of course, there are other technology leaders like Google, Microsoft, and so on and so forth. And so their tools are going to be much more sophisticated, so that there'll be a lot more use of AI as a result, as we know from economics, when something becomes, in other words, it makes prediction cheap. When something becomes cheap, you use a lot more of it. And so that's the takeaway. So the audience, people in the audience, I think you have to think about this. So what is your strength, right? If you have been working in the field of making predictions, then you have to think about this very carefully. How is it going to affect your role in the future? How do you maybe adapt yourself, pick up new skills, and so that you can thrive in this new AI or data-driven economy? And that would be my takeaway. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. David, how about you?
Yeah, those are great comments. I would say don't be afraid to try it. Don't be afraid to look in, ask the questions, get a stronger understanding. Because I would say myself personally, just a few years ago, I didn't think I would have never thought that we would be where we are today as a food company, a protein supplier, using AI like we do and like we're planning on doing as we go into the future. So just because you're maybe watching from your home and you don't feel like your company can take advantage of this type of technology, challenge yourself, challenge your peers in your leadership to ask how AI can help you guys do your business, run your business better, more efficient, more effectively, and help you do what you do better.
Great. Thank you. Go, Ken.
Sure. So actually, my takeaway is pretty similar to what David has. So referring back to a couple of questions that I've seen in the Q&A section, I still see some hesitation, scarcity about AI, which shouldn't be, I believe, to me as an individual and as an IBM employee. Maybe that's because of the scarcity of losing a job. Maybe the people can think that AI will replace their positions and maybe some similar thoughts. But actually, referring back to this morning's presentation from Chris from AWS, AI is not going to make us lose our positions. Actually, we are still secure. Otherwise, it will actually bring us more and more opportunities in the future. And to me, it doesn't really matter which AI solution provider or which AI solution to pick from the providers. There are like really great professionals out there who can help us during this journey, and I believe people can leverage our knowledge as thought leaders, and then they will realize AI is not something to be scared of. And actually, and as a last sentence, we should be using AI to make this world a better place in the future.
Thank you. Shashank, you get the last word.
Thank you. So a few things I would like to reinforce which have been said in different forums. One is it's been said again. Be ambitious, pick something that can actually change something in the organization, but at the same time, pick a use case that you are likely to execute well, and you have the organization behind you. Very, very important that you pick a use case that can demonstrate value and create a nucleus of excitement in the organization. I think that's very important. Then other dimension is be creative. The time that we are in right now, the funding, the project execution will be a little different than it would be in good times. So find creative ways like partnering with your organization. That's very nice for us to learn and grow and the other thing I would say is keep listening. There are a lot of knowledge outside. I'm pleasantly surprised how much knowledge is available freely outside. Tap into that.
Great, that's a great takeaway. Thank you, Shank. So this, I think, will conclude our AI Thought Leader panel.
Yep, we did save time we did have room for questions, but I can just go ahead and read some of the chats that were thrown in. Tyrone said it was an awesome educational experience, and he's nerding out about the machine learning and vehicle identification piece. Ben said automating my sales to order process is something I will be working on. A couple more comments. The time, takeaways, I guess, that people thought of. The time to move forward with AI is now. Don't want to wait for the competition. And AI is doing more than I understood. Going to start it being a part of our discussions in my company moving forward. So those were just some takeaways that people shared with us. So with that said, we can go ahead and end the panel discussion. I know we went a little late, but thank you panelists and thank you audience. Thank you so much panelists for jumping on for this AI in-depth discussion with Conrad. We appreciate you joining us today. If anyone has any final words, you can say them now. Otherwise, thank you for joining.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Good work. Yeah.
It was a pleasure.